Welcome back to Horn Takes, episode 9. Today's a really good day. It's a really good day for a bunch of reasons. One, it's Friday. That means we're going to do the rundown. We're going to talk about some of the games this weekend. Number 2, it's Veterans Day. So thank you for your service to all the veterans out there. Another good reason why today is a good day is I got my first question to answer on this show. So I think that's pretty cool, making progress there. And then, obviously, we've got Mike Roach, Horns247 Recruiting Analyst and author of The Road to Texas. Really cool book about all kinds of different stories about recruits that ended up at Texas that maybe people didn't think they would end up at Texas. So if you like reading stories like that, go ahead and check that book out. Mike, welcome. How are you doing today?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's Friday. Like I said, we're gonna jump on the road early in the morning to head down to Austin, get down there for that game. So we're excited.
Yeah, I was in Austin last night for a game. Went to see the Westlake play and go see Colton Vasek, and there was a buzz already in the air around town, it felt like.
It's interesting that you say that name because that's the first name I wanted to talk about. Colton Vasek, not so much out of the blue, but maybe a little bit unexpectedly, flips his commit from OU to Texas. I know you probably have a lot more inside information to that commitment. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about his recruitment as of late and the commitment itself?
When Colton Vasek first kind of appeared, he appeared next to Ethan Burke, who Texas was able to sign last year. They both played on the same state championship defensive line for the Westlake Chaps. And Vasek was extremely good last year. He was MVP of the state title game, has been a pass rushing force. But it took Texas a little longer to probably recruit him as hard as they should have. And I think that bothered him at first. And so despite him being a legacy, his father, Brian, played at the University of Texas in the 90s. And despite him growing up in Austin, he kind of was looking for reasons to go away from Texas. And Oregon became the school early on that grabbed the bus. But Oklahoma won him over in August, and it almost felt like a rush decision where he went up on a whim to Norman, visited it, and made the commitment. And from that time, Texas continued to recruit him kind of through the whistle. And they just kept chipping away. You know, he showed up for the Alabama game, and while that was down by parts of Oklahoma media as, his family just has season tickets, he wasn't there as a recruit. Like I was the one that broke the report that he was there. I confirmed with every source I had, like, yes, he was there with a lanyard around his neck on the field as a guest of the program. That's different than just showing up. And then, from there, I think it really, the big catalyst for him was the Texas OU game. He'd gone to that game every year with his parents. And he'd always rooted for Texas, and he found himself in the Oklahoma section. And I think he just felt like it wasn't the choice for him, that he had grown up his entire life, liking Texas. And, a lot of other things went into play. Arch Manning got really involved in the recruitment, but I was told basically from the Oklahoma game on, it was going one way. And then he visited for the Iowa State game. And at that point, there was nobody around Austin who didn't think they were getting Colton Vasek. So he made the call probably earlier. You say surprising. The timing was a little earlier than we expected it to be. We thought maybe it would be closer to the early signing period. But once we started hearing the buzz early this past week, we knew it was going to move quickly.
Yeah, and I say surprising, just surprising for probably most guys that don't have as much inside information and insight into the recruiting world as you do. I think most people that follow recruiting with Texas or follow Texas recruiting knew that they were heavy after him. If you follow all these other recruits on Twitter, you were seeing they were always staying plugged in with Colton. So, well, I know you talked a little bit last time you were on the show about Colton as a player. Why don't you give us a little recap? What can we expect from Colton Vasek coming into Texas? He's going to be an early enrollee, I believe. What does that mean,
Yes.
and what do we think we see from him maybe next fall?
I think he has to really dedicate himself to the weight room this spring and see what kind of gains he can put on. He's wiry at his size. He's probably about 6'6", 230 pounds. Really long, really athletic. I was struck last night with just how quickly he changes direction, how quick his hips are for his size. Usually for guys that tall, it takes a while to kind of change direction. It's like turning a cruise ship around. But he can kind of plant, and his hips are so twitchy that he goes the other way with like lightning. The other thing I love about him, and it's kind of what I loved about Ethan Burke as well, and I mentioned his father, Brian Vasek, who played at Texas, is the defensive line coach at Westlake. I think they may be the most well-coached defensive line or probably unit in the state. They are extremely technically sound, so good with their hands. And Colton plays with this violence and suddenness where he loves to attack. He loves to get into offensive linemen and really knock them off their spot. He's very fundamentally sound. I think everything from that aspect is there to play right away. He's just got to kind of get stronger and be able, consistently hold up against the run at the college level.
Gotcha. Do you think we could see him maybe situationally on third downs? I've talked a lot on TikTok, probably on this podcast, about needing to find some guys they can just throw out there on third down and go rush the passer when it's rushing. Is he that type of guy? Maybe if he's not an every down player.
Yeah, I think he is. And if you reach the development curve, I think he is on. I think that one day he's a first round pick or close to it, first or second round pick. I think he really is that type of talent. And so right now, I think that's where you would see him is kind of in the same ways you've seen Ethan Burke utilized this year, where they've had him in on some down situations. They've gotten him in when they can get their starters out of the game and get him some experience. And it was funny. I ran into Ethan Burke and Connor Robertson and Zach Swanson at the game, who were there watching, and talking to Burke, he was just like, man, I'm going to do everything possible I can to make sure it's me and Colton as like the starting guys. We're so excited to get reunited. And, they were such a force for Westlake, and I think could be that same type of force moving forward.
Well, we definitely needed some more defensive ends, some edge rush guys, and I think all of Longhorn Nation is very excited about the Colton Vasek commit. Now, he's not the only thing we should all be excited about. This weekend, just sort of, again, kind of out of the blue, just blew up into this almost opportunity for a really huge recruiting weekend for the University of Texas. Why don't you talk to us about the list of, main guys that are going to be there, maybe some guys that were unexpected that are going to be there? Break it down for us.
Yeah, it went from being a weekend that we knew was going to be pretty big. There were some official visits scheduled. We knew DeAndre Moore was going to be on campus. We knew that Marcus Steele was going to be on campus, to a weekend that just kind of went out of control, and everybody wanting to come to Austin this weekend. And that's what you want. You want Austin to be the place, that kids want to be every weekend to see a big game. Too often lately, that's been College Station or Norman. And, with those struggles, they've been able to turn Texas into kind of the destination for recruits this year in the state of Texas. So, the biggest news, I think, is probably Anthony Hill, who decommitted from Texas A&M, the number one linebacker in the country, from Denton Ryan High School. Probably, I've told people, I've been kind of saying since his sophomore year, I think he's the best pure football player in the state. Like, he's just, we watch a lot of kids, and sometimes you watch a kid and think there's a lot of projection there, but I'm not sure he's a great football player right now. With Anthony, I think he has both the projection and typically he's the best football player on the field. And so he's such a big need to find an impact linebacker, especially at a position that the state doesn't produce at a high level. Texas, again, just kind of stayed on it. A lot of credit goes to Jeff Banks in this one for kind of being the middleman between the staff and Anthony Hill. A lot of credit goes to Chris Gilbert, the director of high school relations, who kept a relationship with Anthony's dad for a long time. A lot of credit goes to Jeff Choate, who's kept in contact with Anthony. It's been a staff, kind of almost a team effort to get him back. They've been angling to get him back for the TCU game. I talked to somebody on Sunday night that said, we're trying to get him here. We don't know if he's going to come. And then by Monday morning, the news was out that he was coming. So I think it's big. He is, once he decommitted from A&M, I think Texas is kind of in the driver's seat when it comes to Anthony Hill. And even though he's talked about potentially taking his decision to signing day, I could possibly see something happening this weekend.
Yeah, I was just fixing to ask you, is there any recruits that are coming in this weekend that you outside chance think we might get a commit from? And then on the other side of that, like, who would be a huge surprise? Like, I know the kid from Arizona, I believe it was a tight end from Arizona that you talked about last time you were on the show. I think this is his first visit to Texas, and I think you mentioned he was already kind of just a super long shot, but he's here. What do you think about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, guys, I think Anthony Hill, something could happen there. I think Jelani McDonald, a four-star athlete from Waco Connolly, is another kid that I would watch this weekend, as I think something could go down there. By the way, he's a phenomenal athlete. He plays quarterback and safety at his high school. Was like a 22-point a game guy in the playoffs for his basketball team on the state qualifier in long jump. In track. So just a phenomenal athlete. Texas likes him as like a linebacker or bigger nickel star position guy. I think those are guys you could see make a move. Even Jacoby Lane, a four-star big body wide receiver from Arizona, a USC commit who's also coming in on the visit. Who you're referencing will be Deuce Robinson, the tight end from Pinnacle High School in the Phoenix area. Deuce Robinson, I think, this will be his second visit, because I recall the time he was on campus, I was there, and he walked by me, and I was just shocked. I was like, "Who is that? We don't know that kid." So we had to quickly figure out who he was. But it'll be his first time back in a while. Texas had kind of fallen out of the race for him, but Arch Manning's commitment got him back in. Arch and Deuce are really close, and Deuce wants to give Texas a look. He was supposed to come in for the Alabama game. His high school game was canceled leading up to the Alabama game and then rescheduled. So he had to reschedule his official visit. This was always kind of the weekend it pointed to. I think USC has all the crystal balls. Georgia has a lot of the buzz right now. I'm interested to see if Texas can move. He is a legitimate baseball prospect as well. Like, if he wanted to focus on baseball, could potentially be a first or second round draft pick. So I would expect to see David Pierce in the Texas baseball program get involved, because he does want to play that at the next level.
Nice. So the game this weekend is obviously, there's a lot riding on it for both teams. It's going to be a huge atmosphere. It's one of the first big night games we've had since probably the USC game a few years ago. I guess the LSU game in 2019 was a night game as well. Notre Dame, just prior to that, was a pretty big night game. But this one's late in the season, and late in the season means there's a lot of stuff on the line. And I think the crowd is going to be crazy. I think it's going to be a really good time. How much do you feel like, just in your experience with these recruits, the atmosphere, the circumstances of the game, the way the games play out for their recruiting visits, how do you feel like that plays into their commitment? And it's probably different for every guy, but give us kind of a baseline. What do you think on that?
Yeah, it is different, but I think it matters. I mean, kids love the raucous environment. I can tell you that the feedback we received after the Alabama game was as strong a feedback as I'd ever heard from recruits at any point in time. In a game they lost, but that the stadium atmosphere was so into it, that the fans were so loud. We had kids who have been to Alabama, who have been to Texas A&M, who have been to Georgia, who have been to Ohio State, tell us that was the most insane game environment I've ever seen in my life. And so I think it matters from that standpoint, right? So if you're a fan and you're going out to the game this weekend, make sure to go be loud, be. I always say it's generally a good idea not to talk to recruits if you're a fan, but if you recognize one, just say, hey, hope you enjoy your time. Give them a nice word. Kids always seem to mention that to us as well. They don't love the people who run up to them and scream in their face that they should commit right now. But hey, hope you enjoy your time, Deuce Robinson or whoever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
And I think results vary, right? Like, it depends on where you are as a program. Texas got the benefit of the doubt for Alabama because of where they are as a program versus where Alabama was as a program, and it looked like a sign of improvement. I am usually in the camp of, like, recruits don't care that much about the week-to-week wins and losses. I think you have to win this week. I think that Texas has to get past the point where it's like, well, we played them really competitively, and recruits will like that. Because at some point, they're going to expect you to take the next step forward, and that is the next step forward for this program.
Absolutely. You look at this game and just with the recruits coming in, and obviously the opportunities from a football perspective, it's kind of interesting. I was thinking about it when I was putting all the notes together for this show. Really, as a head football coach now, you kind of have to play two different games. You've got to actually go play the game with the players that you've got, and you've got to – and I know recruiting's been a thing for a long time, but there's also sort of this angle you have to play at certain parts of your program, like, certain gates in your program where you have to be able to do certain things to get these recruits excited. And I think this is a really great opportunity this weekend for Steve Sarkisian to not only put that big signature win on the field, but also do it in front of a lot of recruits and guys that could come in and help this program take that next step after they get here. So I'm super excited. If you asked me 3 weeks ago if I was excited about the TCU game, or even if I was going to go to the TCU game, I might not have said yes. But just the way things have fallen, it's become a really big game for Texas. And obviously it's a big game for TCU as well to try to keep their hopes alive for the college football playoff. You mentioned you were in Austin last night watching some high school playoffs. Where can some folks, if they want to go see some Texas high school commits, where can they go see those guys tonight?
It depends on where you are. If you're in the Austin area, I'm trying to think if there's I think you would probably only look at Colton. A lot of those Central Texas guys played last night. There's some really fun first round games tonight. I myself will be at Denton Guy or Flower Mound Marcus in the Dallas area. Denton Guy are home to Oklahoma commit Jackson Arnold and Notre Dame safety commit Peyton Bowen. Texas is trying to kind of engage with Peyton Bowen a little bit, who's a 5-star safety who's never paid much attention to Texas. I think he's a phenomenal player. And Peyton usually has been good enough throughout his recruitment that when I walk up to him and say, Peyton, is there anything going on with you? Texas, if there's not, I'll walk away and not bother you. And he'll usually shoot me straight. So it's been a while since I've seen him. Texas has been trying to get back in, so I'm going to go see him tonight. I think that's a really fun game. To me, if you want to go watch, if you're in Dallas and you want to go watch Anthony Hill, he's going to play a really competitive game tonight against Red Oak. Red Oak to TCU commit Warren Roberson, a really athletic corner that Texas tried to get in on late in the cycle. And they've also got some exciting underclassmen talent. I would say consult the best place to go for this. I'm going to plug our friends over at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, texasfootball.com/playoffs. They've got a full list of locations, brackets, anything you want to know on the playoffs.
Nice. So we talked a little bit about recruiting. We talked a little bit about the game this weekend. Talk to us about your prediction for the game on Saturday.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on it. You know how it is. Like following this team, it feels like every time you get a little too high, you just get knocked down. So I'm kind of fighting against that. I think TCU is the most dangerous team they're going to face all year, and that includes Alabama from a weapons perspective. I think their total complement of receivers and running backs and everything is the most explosive and dangerous offense they will see this year. I think we've seen over the past couple of weeks that it almost doesn't benefit Texas to get out to a big lead and then try to hold it in the second half. It feels like that's when they get into trouble. I think a shootout benefits them, and I like Texas to win this one 41-40. I think, like I said, it's a must win. I think they have to win. I think this is a late burn field goal to win it.
All right. Well, that's Mike Roach, recruiting analyst from Horns247. Mike, you're welcome to hang out as we move forward through the show. If you got to go, I understand. I know you're a traveling man, so you're going to hang out?
Yeah, I got to get some work done before I go to the game tonight, so I do got to run.
All right. Well, Mike, I appreciate you being on the show. Again, check out his book if you haven't checked it out already. It's called The Road to Texas, and then there's a whole lot of other stuff after that. But basically, go to Amazon and type in The Road to Texas, Mike Roach. You'll find it. Too easy. Get it shipped to the house. Check it out. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on to the mailbag. So this is the first time we've ever had someone ask a question to be answered on the show. And so Zachary wants to know how I feel about Quinn and his deep ball issues. So anyone that's watched Texas play, seen Quinn Ewers, against Alabama, he looked phenomenal on the deep throws, just absolutely amazing. He dropped 2 great dimes to Xavier Worthy. One was a completion real close to the goal line. One should have been a touchdown. Xavier Worthy will tell you that. He just dropped it. But lately, Quinn hasn't looked so good with the deep pass. So what's going on with that? Well, so how I feel about that is I wish he would stop doing it, Zach. I wish he would get back in that rhythm that he had against Alabama. And if he can get that back and get better with the deep throws, this Texas offense is going to be really, really dangerous. It's already pretty dangerous. It's going to be like amazingly dangerous if he can start hitting on those plays. What I think you meant to ask is, what do I think about Quinn and his deep ball issues? And here's what I think. I think Quinn Ewers is one of those guys. He's not Patrick Mahomes, but he kind of reminds me of Patrick Mahomes, kind of the way he plays. He stands up tall. He'll just kind of flick the ball out there on those screen passes. It never really looks like he steps into a throw. His arm is so strong, he can just flip that thing and it goes about 35, 40 yards like it's nothing. So I think Quinn on the deep throws, he starts to fall back a little bit and he ends up sailing those balls a lot. I think if they can work with him and get his mechanics sound on the deep throw, he'll start hitting those guys. There's no doubt he has a strong arm. There's no doubt he has an accurate arm. There's no doubt that he has touch when he needs to have touch. He's got every throw in his arsenal, but he's got to be a little more fundamentally and mechanically sound on those deep throws. So that's what I think about that. I think he's going to figure it out. It's just a matter of time. He's certainly not afraid to throw them. He goes out every game, and so far he's chunked at least 5-6 down the field every single game. They're going to connect on one, and that's going to give him the confidence. I think it's one of those type of deals where you're just in a slump, almost like a hitter in Major League Baseball. They don't always go up there and hit the ball, and then it just takes one, and all of a sudden they're off to the races again. So that's what I think. Thanks for the question, Zach. If you guys have questions, you can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. I'll be glad to answer them on the show. We do 3 shows a week. All right, let's get into the roundup. We're talking 3 football games today, and these are games that are important to conference championship races. They're important to the sort of national scope of college football, or they're just games that I think are really interesting because of the matchups. So the first one we're going to talk about, number 9 Bama at number 11 Ole Miss. Bama is favored by 11.5 points in this game the last time I looked at it. So I started digging into the stats. I started thinking about, well, how do I think this game will go? Scoring defense is really a wash for both of these teams. Scoring offense is a wash for both of these teams. The passing offense, Bama has a big advantage. Rushing offense, Ole Miss has a big advantage. So I think, to me, this one kind of boils down to, can Bama be Bama again? And can Bama go back on the road after the loss last week and find a way to win a football game? And listen, Ole Miss, not a great football team. They are 8-1, so they're obviously a pretty good football team. They have a lot of weapons, and they're one of the best running teams in the country. So can Nick Saban get that team refocused? Can they go on the road, and can they pull a win out where, frankly, they just haven't been that good? Even in their wins on the road, they weren't that good. We talked about them coming into Austin and just really sneaking by with a win at the end against Texas. And then they go into LSU and they really struggle and lose that game. We talked about even Texas A&M, and let's face it, Texas A&M is a bad football team. They went into Tuscaloosa and gave Alabama everything they had. So Alabama is still a really good football team. They're a really talented football team. We're just not used to seeing Alabama play the way Alabama's played this year. And so for me, I feel like Nick Saban's got to do his best job ever of getting that team focused and getting them ready to go out on the road. I got a prediction for this game. I feel like he's going to be able to do that. Bama's going to win this game 31-27 on the road at Ole Miss. It's going to be close. Ole Miss is going to have a chance late to try to come in and win the game. But I think Bama will make some plays late. They'll walk away with this one. Walk out of Oxford with the win. Next game we're going to talk about, K-State at Baylor. Now this one, neither one of these teams are ranked in the college football playoff poll. That's the only one I use at this point. Baylor's favored by 2.5 points at home. The loser of this one is essentially out of the Big 12 championship game picture. Now, they won't be like completely eliminated, like not mathematically eliminated, but you have to think that whoever loses this game is in really bad shape when it comes to the Big 12 championship picture. This game to me is strength on strength. Kansas State wants to go and run the football, and they do it really well. They average over 200 yards a game on the ground. Baylor has a pretty decent run defense. So which team can go in there and play to their strength, and that strength comes out against the other team's strength, that's going to be who wins this football game. I don't have a prediction on this game, but I think it'll be a fun game to watch. There's a lot at stake for Kansas State. Obviously, there's a lot at stake for Baylor. Obviously, I think it's going to be a good game. Check that one out if you're interested in watching just a game that's got some conference championship implications. Baylor's a well-coached team. Kansas State's a well-coached team. I think it'll be good football. So who's on upset alert this week? I've never done this before, but I decided there's got to be some people that are on upset alert, and I see other guys talk about who's on upset alert. So I'm going to talk a little bit about who's on upset alert. I think LSU on the road at Arkansas is on upset alert. Why? LSU just got done beating Alabama at home. They got done listening to everybody in the country talk about how great they are. That was obviously one of those games where it can be emotionally taxing. Came down to the last play of the game in overtime. They went for it on two. They went for two instead of kicking the extra point. I think LSU might be lacking a little focus this week and might be a little hard for them to get up for this football game. And they're going into Fayetteville, which is never a good place to play, never a fun place to play for visiting teams. And Arkansas, they haven't had a great season. They certainly haven't had the season that a lot of Arkansas fans expected they would have after their season last year. But they're a dangerous team. They got a good quarterback. He can make throws. He can run the ball. They've got some really good defensive players on that team. I'm not calling for the upset, but I would not be surprised at all if LSU lost the game against Arkansas this weekend. The other team I think that is on upset alert is Baylor. They're a 2.5-point favorite at home against K-State. K-State just took a really tough loss to the University of Texas. But K-State is one of those teams, and they always have been one of those teams, that just go game to game. You don't see a K-State team ever let the game the week before really affect the way they play the next week, whether it's good or bad. So I think Kansas State will be ready to play in that game. I think they're going to lean on the running game. I think we'll see Adrian Martinez run a lot more in that game than he did against Texas. And I think we'll see him be more successful running the football in that game than we did against Texas. Again, I'm not calling it, but if Kansas State walked in and covered those 2.5 points and walked out of there with a win, it would not surprise me at all. Now on to the big one for the Texas fans. We've got number 4 TCU at number 18 Texas. Somehow Texas is a 7-point favorite in this game. We've talked about all that stuff before. I don't want to rehash it. It doesn't matter. We talked a little bit about it with Mike. This is a massive game for Texas. There's Big 12 title game implications for Texas. They have to win out. Texas has to win out. And that's all they have to do now. They don't even need help anymore. They just have to win out to play for the Big 12 championship game. It's another opportunity for a signature win for Sark. Recruiting momentum. There's going to be a lot of recruits. We talked about it with Mike. There's a lot of recruits in the house this weekend. As I've been thinking about this game, there's just sort of this feeling about the program right now that it's right on the cusp. It's right there on the edge of taking the next step. Last season was terrible for Texas fans. I don't think there was a lot of Texas fans that really expected too much more than that. I think most Texas fans would have told you we should be bowl eligible. But I don't think there was a lot of Texas fans that were thinking Texas was going 9-3, 10-2, 8-4, anything crazy like that last year. This year, they've taken a step up from that. They've had some issues where they've sort of looked like the team from last year, but they've also sort of gotten a lot of those monkeys off their back at times this year. So this is one of those games to me where they can finally, if they get this win on Saturday, they've finally taken the next step. Now, a lot of you guys are going to confuse that with I'm saying Texas is back. That's not what I'm saying. I hate Texas is back. Anytime Texas even plays a close game with a good team, all the media starts saying, oh, Texas is back. And then I got to hear from every single person on the planet about how Texas is back like I said it. I'm not saying Texas is back. I'm just saying that if they get this win, they're definitely on the right trajectory. Right now, we don't know. Sure, they got a win last week against Kansas State. But they lost that game against Oklahoma State in a lot of the same fashion they lost games last year. Sure, they won that game against Iowa State. But they didn't look great doing it. They struggled. They needed a last-second turnover to seal the deal in that game, just like they did against K-State. Now, the flip side of that is last year's Texas team wouldn't have got that last-second turnover, and they would have lost those games. This year, the guys are still playing hard, and they're making plays to win games. Beat number 4 TCU this weekend, and you are on the right path, Texas. Absolutely. And that's just on the field. We talked a lot with Mike about the recruits that are coming in for this game, how the game itself will sort of lend to these guys leaning more towards Texas. Win this game, and it is huge for Texas. Absolutely huge. On the other side, you got TCU. They're the number 4 team in the country. They're trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. Trying to keep their undefeated season alive. They're doing something at TCU that they haven't done at TCU in a really long time. So as we start to break down this game, I look at all the statistics. Passing offense. Texas is ranked 49th in the country. TCU is ranked 21st in the country. There's about 30 yards that separate them, 35 yards per game that separate them. But a lot of that comes from Quentin Johnston. He's their big guy on the edge that a lot of the NFL guys can't wait to get a chance to grab. He didn't play a lot against Tech, if he played at all. And they asked Sonny Dykes earlier this week, was he going to play this weekend? And he said he hadn't practiced this week. They were expecting he might practice the next day. So I don't know. They struggled pretty mightily against Tech. Really, it wasn't till late in the game, which this seems to be TCU's MO. They seem to struggle for a lot of the game. They get behind, and then they find a way to rally back and win the game late. But really, Tech handed them the ball at the doorstep twice, and they were able to punch it in and stretch that game out and get a fairly comfortable win in a game where they didn't look that good the whole game. The passing game just wasn't – it did not look like an elite offense in that game. And I think a lot of that was because Quentin Johnston wasn't on the field. Rushing offense, Texas is 35th, TCU's 13th. There's about 20 yards that separate those two teams per game. I think the unique thing about TCU's rushing game is Max Duggan, his ability to scramble, his ability to take designed runs. He's a really good athlete. He was a 200-meter guy in high school. He's the wrinkle that Texas doesn't have. Scoring offense, Texas ranked 23rd. TCU's ranked 3rd. Touchdown separates them. Passing defense is almost identical. 258 yards per game for Texas, 251 yards per game for TCU. Rushing defense, 20 yards separate them. Texas has the edge there. Scoring defense, Texas has the edge by 5 points per game. So really, you look at these teams and you look at the statistics, they're all really close. There's not a lot that jumps out off the page at you and says, yeah, this team has an edge right here. Because really, neither team has a decided statistical edge over the other. One thing that is a little bit interesting about TCU and their defense this year and their defensive numbers, they might be a little bit skewed. And I say that because they've played against the backup QB the better part of 5 of their 6 conference games this year. So they haven't been seeing the number one guy a whole lot. The other side of that is they've hurt the number one guy in all those games as well. So they're definitely a physical defense. It'll be interesting to see if Texas can sort of assert their dominance in the run and maybe hit one of those deep balls over the top that they haven't been hitting for most of the season. So the keys to this game for me, number one, Texas has to avoid those second half woes we've been talking about. They have to be able to go out in the second half focused and definitely avoid the pre-snap penalties. Those will kill you. They got to score some points in the second half. You don't score points in the second half, and the other team does score points in the second half, and that old feeling just comes back in. Oh, boy, here we go. It's especially important at home. You want to keep the crowd into the game. You don't want 107,000 people sitting on their hands watching you go 3 and out, watching you get procedure penalties over and over and over again. We don't want to see the punter in the second half, right? We want to see the same type of offensive output that we've been seeing in the first half of games. We want to continue to see that in the second half. We want 107,000 people up on their feet screaming, hollering because we just scored again. I think another key to this game is Texas is going to have to be able to execute what TCU gives them defensively. So TCU is another one of those teams that runs that 3-3-5 stack defense, and they give you all sorts of different looks out of it. Texas is going to have to be able to recognize what's coming at them and take what they give you. My guess is TCU is going to come in and say, we are not going to let Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson run us into the ground. Because if I have to pick between letting that happen or forcing Quinn Ewers to beat me with his arm, Quinn Ewers is super talented. But Quinn Ewers has been struggling. Sort of a pick your poison type deal. I'm going to bet Quinn Ewers is going to keep struggling. I know if I don't do something to change it, Bijan Robinson or Roschon Johnson, they're gonna pick up yards and they're gonna hurt me. Texas is going to have to continue to be strong against the run. They were really good last week against Kansas State. They held Martinez and Deuce to 125 yards combined. If Texas can get TCU one-dimensional, they have a better opportunity to hold up defensively. Texas is going to have to contain Max Duggan. We talked about his little wrinkle into the offense from a rushing perspective. He's a dangerous runner. He may not be as dangerous as Adrian Martinez is, but he's pretty close. He's definitely really, really good at, hey, I'm dropping back to pass. I don't see anything, but I see this big lane up the middle. Let me go get 15, 20 yards real quick. He can do that. They cannot let him hurt them. A lot like they didn't let Adrian Martinez hurt him last week. The Texas defense, we talk about this every single week. The Texas defense has got to be able to get off the field on third down. If they cannot get off the field on third down, it is going to be a really, really long day for Texas. Really, really long night for Texas. So they got to get off the field. Third and longs, especially. Another key to this game, they got to protect Quinn Ewers. We talked about it a little bit ago. TCU has hurt a lot of quarterbacks this year. Now, some of those quarterbacks are running quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers is not a running quarterback. So at least there's that. But they have to keep him upright in the pocket. They need to be able to give him time to get his feet set and follow through on those deep balls. We talked about that a little earlier. Got to keep him in the game, and we got to keep him clean. And then finally, and this is obvious, Bijan and Roschon. I think we finally saw Steve Sarkisian really lean on those two guys last week. I think if he leans on those two guys against Oklahoma State, Texas wins that game. Feed Bijan, feed Roschon. Keep them in the game. Listen, both of those guys can take the ball to the house. We saw it against Oklahoma State. We also saw them both not be successful against Oklahoma State, but then there's that one, bam, gone. Housed it, 6 points. I think sometimes Steve Sarkisian, the running game doesn't come as easy for Texas as it came at Alabama. And he gets away from it. He's got to let those guys eat. All right, it's prediction time. The line 7 points in Texas's favor. TCU's the fourth-ranked team in the country. Mike Roach thinks it's the most dangerous offense that Texas will face all year. Game's at home, though. Texas plays a little bit better on the road, at home. It's a night game. There's going to be over 100,000 sauced-up Texas fans ready to go ballistic every time something great happens for the University of Texas. I was at that Alabama game that we talked about earlier, and Mike mentioned so many recruits commented on how it was just the most amazing atmosphere they've ever been at. I was there, and it was. So Darrell K. Royal can get crazy under the right circumstances, and I think Saturday night is one of those circumstances. So what all does that mean for the outcome of the game? I don't think Texas is covering 7 points. But I don't think TCU is as good as their record says they are. I think Texas is going to win this game 34-31. TCU will get back in it late. They might even threaten late. So 34-31 Texas. That's my prediction. Thank you guys for listening to the podcast. Thanks again to Mike Roach, recruiting analyst for Horns247, for joining us today. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. rate the podcast. You guys can find me on TikTok at HornTakesPodcast. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Hook 'em.